Hey guys, it's your girl, Crystal Nicole. So, in the informal response from the Attorney General, we have now discovered that the gun, the fragments, the shells, the casings, etc. have all not been misplaced or are not missing. They are sitting in evidence available for a retest if Tory's team plans to do so. Now, this information has come out because not too long ago, Tory's team, Unite the People, had put in a writ of habeas corpus claiming that the gun and the fragments were missing, and they also claimed that the DNA expert Randy had testified at trial that the fingerprints from the gun and the shells had not been preserved. So, let me clear up something that I stated wrong. Right out the gate from this, I thought in the writ that they were saying that the fingerprints and the shells were missing, but they're saying that the fingerprints from the gun and shells had not been preserved. So it's not that the shells were missing, it's that the fingerprints from those shells were missing. Okay? Now, Alex Sparrow, Megan's lawyer, immediately came out saying that this was a lie and that the gun was still in evidence. And a response from the Attorney General regarding this writ was uploaded today by Megan Cuniff. So, the Attorney General has added declarations from the police and Randy, the DNA expert, claiming that all of these things were still available. So in the writ, Tory's team was basically arguing that Tory did not receive a fair trial because the DA refused to treat Kelsey like a suspect by testing her DNA against a gun after she was called out as a shooter that night by eyewitness and testing positive for GSR. Now, the DA and the defense agrees that the DA does not have to provide evidence to help aid the defense. However, this argument, although true, doesn't change the fact that if prosecutors had believed that Tory was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, they shouldn't have had a problem eliminating Kelsey as a suspect to make their case stronger, seeing as the defense was accusing her, and vice versa. Since the defense was accusing Kelsey of being the shooter, one would think one of the first things you would have requested is for her DNA to be tested against the gun once a female's DNA was found on the weapon. So why was that not done? The DA is arguing that this should have been done before a trial, not after their client was found guilty. So therefore, they don't feel like they violated anything by not treating Kelsey like a suspect or testing her DNA. They had the suspect they wanted, so it was the defense's job to prove her guilt, not theirs. And I don't 100% disagree with this, and I would like to know why nobody ever requested for Kelsey to be tested. Was it not allowed or something? Did they refuse the request? What was the reason for why Kelsey was never tested by either side? Now, the defense argued that the gun was missing, but it's now in evidence, so they will have to explain how and why they believe that gun was misplaced. They claim the fragments were missing. Now, those fragments have been missing since 2021 and apparently was still missing at trial, as I don't recall them being shown not one time. So I don't believe those are the fragments they are talking about. Now, we know the police picked up shells and casings from the scenes, and that could have also included fragment pieces as well. So the wording of this is a little manipulative. They need to make it clear which fragments are available. The ones from Megan's foot or the ones found at the scene. If it's the ones from Megan's foot, they'll have to ask the detective why he said they were missing since 2021 and why this wasn't brought up at trial if they actually were available. They said that the fingerprints from the gun and shells were missing. Not that the shells were missing. That was a mistake on my end, like I already said. So the DA entered a declaration from Randy, the DNA expert, claiming that he had swabbed the gun and magazine, and although the initial swabs aren't available, he still has some remnants basically left from those swabs to test if needed. So in the writ, they said that Randy had testified to the fingerprints from the gun and shell casings had not been preserved, and that the state had destroyed the available DNA during testing, and that the state refused to provide the defense an opportunity to retest the firearm for DNA. So Randy's declaration is the state refuting the defense's claim that all the DNA had been destroyed by the state by using Randy. So on one hand, Randy is saying that the defense is right. The initial swabs taken from the gun and magazine had been destroyed, but he does still have some available for retest if they need it. But he doesn't mention anything about the fingerprints not being preserved, which is what he testified to and is all that the defense said he said wasn't preserved. So there's some confusion here. Now, the testimony from the expert at trial makes it seem as if there had been fingerprints found, but they had not been preserved. But the state's response to this is basically that they have no proof that any fingerprints were ever found on the weapon and that the LAPD no longer test shell casings for fingerprints. So there is no basis to claim that they destroyed fingerprints when there were no fingerprints lifted to be preserved in the first place. So why did the expert specifically say that the fingerprints from the gun and shell casings had not been preserved? If there never had been any fingerprints in the first place, why didn't he just say that? So there's something wrong there. Now, they go on to say that even if there had been fingerprints, they would have just belonged to Tory. So here's the thing. If they found 4 different DNA samples on that gun, enough to be able to obtain the percentages of male to female DNA, then you cannot just assert that if there had been fingerprints, they only could have belonged to Tory when the 90% DNA profile on that gun belonged to an unknown male. One would think if you obtained DNA, you could have also obtained fingerprints. And they are arguing that they didn't collect any fingerprints or there just were no fingerprints found. It's not really clear if they did or didn't attempt to collect fingerprints. They're just saying, hey, we don't have to help prove your defense. We don't have to test Kelsey. You all should have requested she be tested, and you haven't entered anything claiming that there was an attempt to do so, or any evidence of a denial by the state for you to do so. And unfortunately for you, discovery is supposed to happen before or during trial, not after your client was found guilty. So that's on you, not us. Now, I see the DA as being manipulative because they are trying to act like Tory has no reason to be acting like they didn't do their due diligence when it comes to how they investigated this case. So let's run back through this investigation, okay? So on July 12, 2020, the police were called about people arguing in an SUV where shots were fired into the air by an unknown suspect before the SUV fled the scene. Police quickly responded to the calls and apprehended the suspects not far from the scene. Police questioned the neighbors and witnesses who called 911. They were told about a loud argument. A physical altercation happened between the 2 females. One of those females were seen firing the weapon before a short man got out attempting to stop the shooting, which is when they saw shots fired into the air. The female fell to the ground bleeding, then crawled across the street to a driveway. Eventually, all parties got into the car and fled the scene, making a U-turn before fleeing in the opposite direction. Now, police gathered evidence off the ground from that physical altercation and the shooting. Police ran a GSR test on the 3 parties detained at the precinct. Tory and Kelsey tested positive for GSR. Kelsey's injuries were photographed. All 3 individuals refused to speak to police, and Kelsey wanted an attorney. Tory was charged for the weapon just because it was found under his seat, and nobody was charged for assault with a firearm as police had no gunshot victim. They were told that Megan just had a glass injury like she told them, and that's what they put in their reports before leaving the hospital. Now, Kelsey was not charged for assault or disturbing the peace, nothing. Even though she clearly had been in a fight given her injuries, and she clearly had been near that weapon or handled that weapon when it went off, given the GSR report. But because they all refused to cooperate with police, the only charge they pressed was the concealed gun charge. Now, a few days later, Megan announced that she was shot on social media, but police seemed to have absolutely no idea about this. They were never told. So, of course, Megan now had to speak to the detective. She told the detective that Tory had shot her from the back seat as she was walking to the rear of the car. Yet, we heard no charges pressed against Tory for assault. The DA said they needed to investigate more, so let's stop here. What investigation did they do exactly? Because again, they had an eyewitness who gave them a different story than the victim, Megan. And his story was backed up by the evidence police were able to obtain that night, meaning Kelsey's injuries backing up the fight that the witness saw between her and Megan, Kelsey's nails and necklace found on the ground further backing that up. He saw her shooting and she tested positive for GSR, backing his story up of her shooting. So how did we skip past all that information to only focus on Tory being the shooter? When exactly did they do anything to make sure Kelsey hadn't been the shooter like Tory and the witnesses were claiming? They clearly were trying to exclude her from even being looked at as a suspect, because I'd like to know how the police managed to mention what Sean Kelly said about a fight in their reports, but failed to mention what he said about the shooting. Their reports just say an unknown suspect fired shots into the air, which is what the media reported. How is it the media was never made aware of an eyewitness and what he saw until the preliminary hearing happened? The only news we got was that Tory got arrested for a gun and Megan went to the hospital for a cut to her foot. Not one article got a single report about this eyewitness from police, but police seem to be feeding the blogs information, especially TMZ. So how is it that he was excluded from their reports to the media? After Megan announced she was shot and people were wondering how come Tory hadn't been arrested yet, we just heard that the witnesses weren't cooperating, and Megan saying conflicting things like her back was turned could make it difficult to charge Tory. Still heard nothing about this eyewitness. Then when the eyewitness was finally talked about, the blogs tried to twist what he said about that fight into just a verbal argument between Kelsey and Megan. And then Kelsey and Megan also came out making posts trying to divert people's attention away from it. Kelsey said that celebs just be making up shit, and Megan said that she was shot and all we wanted to focus on was a cat fight between girls and how the media wasn't credible. So it seems as if they were doing everything to only keep the focus on Tory by outright intentionally ignoring the eyewitness and all the evidence that pointed to exactly what he said happened. The public was flooded with nothing but articles of Tory being the shooter without ever hearing an alternative story until a year later. And like Tory said, even when that news came out, they tried to overflood it with multiple articles only trying to report on what the detective said Megan told him about the shooting instead of major focus on what the eyewitness said. Then to add insult to injury, Tory and his attorney was gagged from speaking right after this hearing, and Megan and Kelsey lied about having any type of relationship with Tory, further making it seem like this was all just fake news created by him to divert away from him committing a crime. So this witness had to be lying in the public's eye, or possibly paid by Tory to say this. Just to find out at trial that both of these girls actually had been involved with him, and there had been an argument that night regarding this information being exposed by Tory, which is why it was relevant, because it's what led to a fight and a shooting. But yet again, Megan and her team quickly tried to divert everyone's attention away from this by acting dunce to why Megan lying about this wasn't such a big deal when it was. So again, exactly what investigation did prosecutors do into Kelsey after receiving all the initial evidence and witness statements? The only thing they have to say is, well, it's not our job to help prove your case. But it is their job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty, and ignoring another very possible guilty party without doing any due diligence whatsoever to make sure there was no way possible she could have done this is what makes it seem like there was a personal vendetta into coming after Tory. As Megan just saying it clearly wasn't enough to make y'all charge him. She gave too many conflicting stories to be credible, so y'all definitely needed more than just her word and needed to be sure that Kelsey was excluded, but y'all thought she was guilty too. Isn't that why y'all threatened her with jail time if she didn't come in and speak to you? Did you not realize that her and Megan's stories were not the same after your initial interview with Kelsey? Is Kelsey needing immunity and turning on y'all during trial not further proof that maybe y'all should have looked into Kelsey a little harder than you did? So to sit here and act like he has no basis to make these claims against y'all is just ludicrous. The same way the defense should have made sure she was looked into since they were accusing her is the same way prosecutors should have done what they could to exclude her, to easily kill the defense. So it seems as if both sides failed to do anything when it came to Kelsey. And I can't keep saying this enough of how much of a problem that is, because that's not called justice. Now, I wasn't surprised by this information given the silence from Unite the People ever since Alex ran to the blogs to bat for Megan. They were quick to respond to Sean Hawley, but dead silent when it came to Alex, which was a major red flag to me. So this was expected. It's almost as if this was set up to go this way, as I find it very interesting that this news came out right before a certain documentary and lawsuit dropped alleging misinformation, just for this claim to be one of the accusations made in this very timely lawsuit. Now, Unite the People, y'all are not Sean Hawley. Y'all have not been gagged from speaking up on this case, and it would be nice if y'all spoke up at the appropriate times, because this does not look good. I haven't liked a single attorney a part of this case because I'm noticing things that they are not saying and doing that they should be. That makes me wonder. However, we will give y'all the benefit of the doubt and hope that y'all have a very great explanation as to why y'all thought that the gun was missing, misplaced, whatever the case. So I will be impatiently waiting for your response to the Attorney General on this. And I really hope it's a good one. Okay? So with that being said, that's all I really have to say on this. You guys leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you to all of those who tuned into this video. I want to send a special shout out to all of those who stayed around until the end of the video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And as always, free Tory.